Diana, for where people will land. People are throwing darts. Even some of the gambling odds look insane. I'll say this. Kirk Cousins is the biggest mystery to me. Does he stay in Minnesota? Does he go to Atlanta? But most importantly, Diana, what are you hearing on his asking price? Because when I see Tua, maybe 50 mil, Dak Prescott, like 55 to 60 mil, that's insane. And then you look at Kirk Cousins, like coming off the Achilles. Is he 40? Is he 45? Does he wait to see what Baker gets and say, I want more than Baker, I'm a better quarter? Like, how does that work?
Well, Kirk is pretty much determining his market right now because he obviously has the history to prove that he can play at a really high level. But yeah, you're right. You have to consider that 35-year-old coming off an Achilles injury, right? Teams aren't going to be able to run medical on him to, they're going to probably sign him before he can even get in the building. So that is a really big risk when you don't know what your team doctor is going to find. And you got to hope, based on some of the videos he's posting and just some of the chatter, that he's going to be okay. But I think for Kirk, Jay, it's more about the structure of the deal. I don't think this is so much about him trying to get some high number. I do think he'll get probably around that $40 million number a year. But it's about Kirk being the guy with his team. It's making sure that an organization is committed to him being there, not just for one season, but perhaps for 2 and 3. So I think that's going to be really the part of this deal that's going to determine where he goes. And the question remains, is Minnesota willing to do that, right? Because they've committed almost $200 million to Kirk Cousins, and they don't have a Super Bowl ring, right? And that's what they want. So you have to figure it's probably really hard for the Vikings owners to sit there and go, yeah, let's do this again. Let's go for another 40 APY for the next 3 years guaranteed, or the next 2 years. That's tough, right? But we also know how good this team can be and how much Kevin O'Connell really likes working with Kirk Cousins and how he is used in this offense. So you have a team like Atlanta. They're built to win. They've got the defense. They have the O-line. They've got the weapons. Maybe they're going to be adding some more weapons too in this free agency. We'll see if that's enticing enough with a good structure, with a good contract. If Kirk is willing to say, you know what, I love Minnesota, but I'm going to take my services to ATL, and doesn't hurt his wife Julie's from there too.
How much stock should we put in, though? Zach Robinson comes from the Rams. We know historically McVay and Shanahan have been enamored with Kirk Cousins and his play action ability. How much stock should we put in Zach Robinson, who I believe, I Googled this, I don't think he's ever called plays before in a regular season game?
He hasn't called any. Yeah, he hasn't called any plays, which, we have this discussion all the time, right? Like, how much does that really matter? Yeah. Does it matter? Some people say yes. Some people say no. You have to figure Minnesota's probably pitching to Kirk, stay here. You know who's calling plays. His name's Kevin O'Connell. He's really good at it. You're comfortable with him. But Zach Robinson has a really good reputation around the league. And yeah, you're right. He's from that McVay tree. And I always joke, it's like the Kirk Cousins mob, right? These guys love Kirk Cousins. But I think really the point of it is that Zach Robinson speaks the language that Kirk knows and is comfortable with. So he could step into this. And with Raheem Morris having that comfort with Kirk Cousins from their time in Washington, there's a relationship there. And I don't think it's going to be a really big step for Kirk Cousins to go to Atlanta here and figure out a way to be part of this offense. And it may be something he'd be open to. So I do think the Zach Robinson part of it, the fact that he comes from the Sean McVay tree, just helps Atlanta's cause once this tampering window opens up and they can really full court press this thing.
Let's go to Baker Mayfield, Diana. Everybody seems to predict he's going to stay in Tampa, but, you heard somebody, I think Daniel Jeremiah floated the Patriots recently. Money always a factor. I think you said 40 maybe for Kirk Cousins. Does Baker Mayfield see that and say, hey, I got my team to the playoffs last year. We weren't supposed to be there. We were supposed to be terrible, a bottom feeder. I want 45. And Tampa's like, whoa, that's a little too rich for our blood. I don't know. Salary cap going up. What do you think Baker gets from Tampa?
Yeah, I think if Baker Mayfield says 45 to Tampa, they say, okay, Kyle Trask, here's the football, go. They're not paying that. As good as Baker has been for them, and as much as I know they love Baker, from the coaching staff to the locker room, I mean, we saw everything he did last year. It was such a great fit. They, of course, just re-signed Mike Evans, so they have a weapon there that Baker wants and has success playing with. But in terms of the money, I don't get the sense that Baker's asking for some wild Daniel Jones type contract type number. I think he's looking for sort of just a fair market price for him. And look, this is a guy who's making $4 million last year. So, in my opinion, anything more than 30 for Baker coming out of this is a huge win. But I'm not sure if Tampa is willing to really go anything above that 33, 34, $35 million range for Baker. And, you always have a little bit of that Florida no tax element as part of these negotiations. Teams try to keep those numbers down by using that because the players are going to make more money in that way, and that's great for them. But they don't have to deal with the taxes. So I still think Tampa is going to figure this out. But I will tell you, there are teams waiting to see, and they are watching closely. And Minnesota is one of them. If they don't think that they're going to be able to land Kirk, I expect them to go after Baker right after this.
Okay, so wait, you said Tampa 33 to 35. But like Daniel Jones got, I think, 40. We all agree it was a terrible contract. But like Baker, I mean, if I'm in his camp, I'm like, bro, Daniel Jones he's the worst quarterback than you. How does he get 40? They need to pay up. Like, I don't know. Let's say Tampa says we're holding firm at 30, 33, 35, and Baker walks away. What do the Vikings do? Would the Vikings go to 40?
I think the Vikings would be willing to give him a good contract. I do. I think that, first of all, you sound like Bill Parcells when you talk about the market, right? Because he's like known for going, the market dictates the price, right? Yeah. Like, don't get mad at Baker Mayfield for asking for a Daniel Jones contract, because the reality is that's what he is. Now, that being said, there was a horrible deal by the Giants, and I'm sure Joe Schoen hates it and would love to redo it, but they were in a position where at the time they felt they needed to do it. So it makes sense for Baker's people to say, hey, this is the starting number, but his representation is they're just like very logical agents. I don't find them to be just these over-the-top nut jobs that are trying to just crush teams. I think they're going to try to just get the best value for Baker, but in a fair way. So, look, it would shock me if Baker winds up landing at 40 million. Could he? Maybe. I don't think it's going to get that high. I think that number for Baker really just sits between 30 and 35, and we'll see if Tampa's going to be willing to go up and get him.
All right, two quick ones. Justin Fields, it sounds like if you're playing musical chairs with the quarterbacks, Fields could be the odd guy out. I've been saying Seattle. We don't know what the new regime thinks of Geno Smith. I think everybody else thinks Geno Smith is pedestrian. I would roll the dice with Fields. Is that me? What are you hearing on Justin Fields here?
Yeah, his market isn't robust right now because it has everything to do with what we just discussed, really, this quarterback market and the domino effect and where Justin falls, right? And you have to look at it as tiers, right? So it's very rare in free agency. You have quarterbacks of the caliber of Kirk Cousins and Baker Mayfield available. Right. So this has affected the Justin Fields market because teams are going to want to go for Baker and Kirk before they want to go for Justin Fields. So let's say the team, and there's only 8 teams right now that need starters. All right. So let's say 2 of them get the 2 quarterbacks, right? So that leaves you 6 left. And some of these teams would prefer a guy like Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, sort of these bridge quarterbacks types that could step in and start week 1. They may not finish the year as the starter, but they understand, they know what they're going to get. I still think there's just a lot of question marks about Justin Fields outside of Chicago. You talk to Chicago, and there are a lot of people there that still want Justin Fields there.
Yeah.
There are people there that think that they should stick with Justin over going for Caleb Williams, which sounds crazy, but that's the attachment some people do have and belief in Justin Fields. Yeah. But I can just speak for the teams I've talked to outside of Chicago. I think we're going to see a second wave of quarterbacks come through.